Welcome back. A lot has happened in the past few days. And then we're seeing, the Tinubu administration is giving over 100 billion, 131 billion as bailouts for the floods in states in the country. And then, of course, we also heard from the Zamfara, what I keep saying Zamfara, the Borno State governor yesterday, saying 3 billion is what is given to them, to handle the flood situation in Borno. We're also seeing Kano State talking about how many people have been affected by floods since January, 49 people dead. In Kaduna State, there's also a flood situation going on in Lere local government area. It's cut off 5 communities. So what's happening to governance at state levels? Usually when the rains come, it's a sort of a litmus test of how you've done since the last rain. The issue is, after that, there are no consequences. You get the bailouts, and then life just keeps moving on until next year. Then we now hear of another flood and another bailout. The Tinubu administration and the way it is handling governance in Nigeria will be our focus this morning on the program. And joining us, Mr. Femi Aboishade, author and legal practitioner. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
So let's start our conversation this morning with your views on how governance is being done under the Tinubu administration. Where would you rate it right now?
That's a big question. I think, first of all, fundamentally, we need to understand the philosophical perspective of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to governance. And to understand him, we need to pay attention to a speech he made as president on the 31st day of July 2023. In that statement, he said he was aware, and he has been repeating it, that he's aware that people are going through tough times, but that there is no alternative. In other words, there is no alternative to imposition of hardship. But the understanding of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu may also be deduced from the statement he made in 2012, when President Jonathan increased fuel price. And then Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu explained that it was a wicked policy. It amounted to tossing people into the midnight sea, and that it reflected the category of people, the class of people that the government of President Jonathan wanted to favor. The class of people President Jonathan wanted to support, and that fuel price increase was to increase the hardship on the people. That it was a political decision to favor a particular class of people. Therefore, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu reiterating in 2023, 31st of July, that there is no alternative to economic policies of hardship, means that it is a deliberate policy of his government to punish the people with the socio-economic policies being implemented by the regime. I think that is the background upon which we can assess all the policies of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. That understanding is important. The policies are deliberately made to favor what he called the European friends of President Jonathan, as against helping ordinary people.
the
I
Tinubu
want to begin
administration
from
is doing
there.
right now as well? Are you accusing him of doing the same thing that he accused former President Jonathan of doing?
Precisely. I'm using his ideas in explaining the policies of President Jonathan to explain the policies being implemented by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Well, for many
He
people
has been
from the
carrying out more
presidency,
or less the same policy
when they
for
listen
a
to
purpose.
Nigerians and of course people like you as well who complain about his policies and how these policies have impoverished or reduced the quality of life of Nigerians. One of the major things they keep talking about is how these were difficult decisions that needed to be made, and that we should be patient. That the El Dorado is still some ways ahead, but we are heading to El Dorado, and that we should be patient. This is a brave decision that would ultimately pull our country out of years of decay that could have, destroyed our nation. Hold on a little bit, it will be fine. You don't agree with that?
I don't agree, and I will further react by letting us know what he said as far as similar policies, the same policy really, of President Jonathan is concerned. He said, and permit me just to read, to summarize his point of view first, he said, government should save the poor, the people, rather than saving money. He said, and I quote, this is a statement he made in 2012. However, I'm quoting him now in 2012. Because the distance between government and the people is far and genuine level of affection is low, government sees no utility in continuing to spend the current level of money on the people. In their mind, the people are not worth the money government sees. Government sees more value in saving money than in saving the hard-pressed masses. That was President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in 2012. And he went further to say that, yet, what does government actually save this measure? The concept of a government that has the unfettered ability to print its own currency, needing to save the currency for fear of insolvency, is an anachronism. And he said, for a government that prints its own currency, attempting to save in that very currency in order to defend against bankruptcy in that currency is a relic of the past. So President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a very clear-headed person who understands the implications and the reasons why government implement certain policies.
That's a very interesting. I mean, I'm trying to soak it all in as you say it, but I want to be able to talk a little bit about fuel subsidy removal. And, that was the famous statement he made when he came into office on that day, that ground at Eagle Square, where he said subsidy is gone. And of course, over the months, we've been able to understand that, it wasn't budgeted for. And he was basically just saying the facts, it's gone. It's not budgeted for, But, the question amongst many Nigerians is the fact that, okay, so subsidy is gone, which many people wanted. People protested asking for the subsidy regime to end. But that money was supposed to go into other areas. What areas have they gone into? Is there some kind of explanation as to where the money is right now? What do you make of that conversation?
Well, my position is that in the first place, I want to differ from you. I want to disagree with you. People did not protest against retention of subsidy. People have actually been protesting against removal of subsidy, to the best of my knowledge and practical involvement in those protests. But I think the question we should ask is, why is it that we need to import fuel? There is no basis for importation of fuel in the first place. The refineries owned by government ought to be working. And if crude oil is being refined in government-owned refineries, there will be no need for importation. Let us recall that in 1994, under General Abacha, fuel was being sold for 11 naira per liter. Out of 11 naira per liter, but 5.32 kobo, 5 naira 32 kobo was being saved and kept in what was called the Petroleum Trust Fund. In other words, from what people were paying for fuel, savings were being made, and the savings were being used for execution of projects in education, roads, healthcare, and so on. Therefore, importation is the key issue. And over $25 billion have been invested as of 2020 in turnaround maintenance. We have nothing to show for it. What government ought to do is to take the fight against corruption to the oil industry. But they find it difficult to take the fight against corruption to the oil industry. They find it convenient to punish the people. And let me also recall, in 2012, in writing, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu called on Nigerians. He said it was the duty of every Nigerian to come out and protest peacefully against removal of fuel subsidy, which he called then the Jonathan tax. So we are also compelled to resist the Tinubu tax.
Mr. Barishade, your assertions are quite interesting, and you have gone down history lane or memory lane to bring up some facts from the Abacha days and what was happening. But let's just stay in that down history memory lane and look at some of the things that Nigeria was able to produce and why you think, or why we're having the challenge of production at this point in time. Nigeria was a nation that was producing something, and we still have those raw materials. For instance, Nigeria is one of the largest producers of rubber, one of the largest producers of cocoa. We also have leather in Nigeria. We also have things that we could use to make products. What do you think is the biggest challenge? Because you've said one of the biggest challenges of Nigeria is continuous importation. And that's one of the things that's weakening our naira. Why are we not producing? Why do you think it's so difficult for Nigerians to get back to the production line? And even where the industries are located, they're not able to do much. You'd still blame that on the government?
Of course. Government is to dictate the direction of the economy. That is why we have a government. Any business today in the country that is not patronized by government may find it difficult to survive. But they are not interested in producing. As Peter Obi put it, the ruling class is more interested in consumption. To think about utilizing, engaging in manufacturing, in developing the manufacturing sector, it is not of interest to them. They are prepared to play the role of what we call the comprador bourgeoisie, just taking the crumbs from the tables of the imperialists. They are prepared, they are happy, they are contented being the errand boys of a big international capital. So that is the problem. They are not interested in governance in the interest of the people. The Constitution provides that government shall own and control the major sectors of the economy so as to abolish poverty as stipulated in Section 15, sub 5 of the Constitution. But they are interested. They are prepared to cede the responsibility of government to the private sector to provide jobs, From their point of view, it is the responsibility of government. To provide health care, it is the responsibility of government. To provide education, it is the responsibility of government. In actual fact, recently, there is a statement which I downloaded and printed from the website of the presidency, wherein they have put for sale all tertiary institutions in the country. Universities, polytechnics, colleges of education. They are inviting the private sector, domestically and internationally, to come and buy the government-owned tertiary institutions. So the ruling classes in Nigeria appears to be an irresponsible, ruining class. I call them ruining class rather than ruling class, because they are not prepared to accept responsibility for public good, for education, for water, for jobs, for housing. Everything, they are putting it on the private sector. And the private sector intervention, private sector individuals and companies are not philanthropists. They want to make money. And when institutions, tertiary institutions are sold, universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education, only the children of the rich will be able to access education.
Mr. Borishade, if I may come in here, well, there's this school of thought that believes that the politicians are just a reflection of the society of Nigeria. You talked about the private sector, they just want to make money. So if someone from the private sector gets into office, the next thing he wants to do is to also make money. And so the corruption continues to perpetuate itself. So at what point do we say enough is enough? Can the society...
No.
Yes.
We should reject that practice, that perspective, because those who contest to come into public office, they do so on the basis of Section 14 sub 2B of the Constitution. Section 14 sub 2B of the Constitution provides that security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Therefore, government is not about making money. Government is not about enjoyment of the individuals in power. But unfortunately, the moment politicians get to power, first, they campaign because they want to improve the living standards of the people. But the moment they are in public office, they tend to use public office against public good. That is what we must fight against. And that is why Nigerians all over the country trooped out, protesting against the imposition of, the increase in fuel price, to the point that people are saying they are hungry. You are in power not to starve us, you are in power to implement policies and programs to feed us, to provide opportunities for jobs. In actual fact, according to the Constitution, government has a responsibility to either provide jobs or provide unemployment allowance. Government has a responsibility to pay a national minimum living wage and not to allow people to go hungry. So all over the country, people trooped out, say they are hungry. Ebing power in Yoruba, in Hausa, Munajin Yunwa, and in Igbo, the same thing, the protests all over the country.
The one in
Unfortunately,
Igbo. I'm going to give you the one in Igbo. Agum. Yes. Let's not leave them out. But I want Agum.
Ago, very good. Thank you very much.
I want us to be able to talk more about where we are. I mean, listening to you, of course, we've heard these things before. And just so we can get that correction, yes, you are correct. Protests were against the removal of fuel subsidy. But of course, we did hear, protests don't have to be on the street all the time. We did hear many people talk about how this regime is corrupt. It's not helping the country. This is a bad idea. How do we get this over with? Okay, now we are where we are. And I think someone said they are going to put that thing next to my face somewhere. We are here, we are. This is the situation now. What is the way forward? Because we can't change the past. I can't go back. We can't go back and, change anything that's already happened. What should happen now? Should the fuel subsidy regime come back? Should there be some kind of rejigging of the Tinubu cabinet? Where do we go from here?
Well, first of all, about fuel subsidy. In reality, there is no basis for subsidy if we removed corruption. Subsidy is just subsidizing corruption. I gave the example of 1994 under Abacha. There was no question about subsidy. The problem is that successive Nigerian governments are not prepared to ensure that we refine crude oil in government-owned refineries. And that is what we must insist they do. And rather than imposing economic hardship on the people while they are living large, we are saying that we should develop, those in power should develop a people-oriented philosophical perspective. Rather, they are living large. In a situation in which they say the economy is bad, we have a situation in which the president has just bought a new jet for $150 million. Presidential yacht of 5 billion naira. Cars for the First Lady, 1.5 billion naira. To renovate VP House, 21 billion naira. SOFs for the National Assembly, 160 million. Presidential Tax Reform Committee, made up of less than 20 persons, 5 billion naira. First Lady decoration of event for the First Lady. In 5 days alone, $250 million. Yet, the school fees has been increased, education has collapsed, healthcare has collapsed, there are no jobs, hike in electricity tariff, and so on. So we must insist that government should be guided by Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution. Security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Where a government fails to actualize Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution, then the solution lies in the people, resorting to the provision of Section 40 of the Constitution, which I call a peaceful revolt provision, to gather peacefully and protest peacefully that government should be sensitive. Unfortunately, as we have seen, government has not been able to actualize Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution. Those who protested, government has arrested some of them and charged them for treason and terrorism. But peaceful protest under the Constitution is a fundamental right. It can never amount to treason. Peaceful protest can never amount to terrorism. So in my own opinion, any government that is unable to govern in accordance with Section 14(2)(b) of the Constitution has lost all the legitimacy to remain in power. And for as long as people protest peacefully, they have a right to say that particular government should resign, should either change its policies or resign. It is within their fundamental right to so do, provided they protest peacefully.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bruchard. You know, the question that comes to my mind, and I'm happy that you went back in time to look at some of the things that got us here. One of the questions that I've always asked is along the line of the fact that the people who are in government today were not in government 40 years ago. In fact, I mean, when you're talking about the fact that some Nigerians, they tend to enjoy or prefer, or government tends to enjoy or prefer imported stuff as opposed to things that are made in Nigeria or facilitating production in the country. I remember a speech I read, I've been looking for it, I can't find it again, of Chief Obafemi Awolowo before the 1960 independence, addressing students in the UK, Nigerian students in the UK, that their leaders preferred imported stuff as opposed to locally produced stuff. So it seems like a systemic thing. And irrespective of whichever government comes into power, it would seem like it's either we do that or we really look for some big stick to do something. How do you see us getting into that space of patriotism, where no matter where you are in the country, be it at the federal level or at the state level, Nigeria comes before your pocket? Do you see that happening?
If ordinary people insist that governance should be about their interests, for now, governance or governments government has been hijacked. It is a conspiracy against the interests of the people. And that is why we must insist that if people want imported stuffs at their own expense, they may do so. But the moment you are in power, the moment you are in public office, you cannot be allowed to waste public resources. Let me say this. In 2003, Chief Gani Fawemi contested to be president of Nigeria. I contested to be governor of Oyo State. At the same time, Femi Falana contested to be governor of Ekiti State. Ozaki Obayuana contested to be governor of Edo State. The current governor of Kaduna State also contested to be governor of Kaduna State. The point I want to make is that we signed an undertaking. Chief Gani Fawemi was always going abroad at his own expense for medical treatment, at his own expense. But he signed an undertaking that the moment, if he were elected as president of Nigeria, he will seek medical treatment, medical care in government-owned hospitals. And that will compel government to commit resources to transforming the public hospitals. In the same way, the undertaking also included that our children will not receive education abroad, that we will not use generator to provide electricity. So these were some of the points that were contained in that undertaking. Today, the story is different. Those in power prefer to embark on medical tourism, neglecting ordinary people to the collapsed healthcare system. My suggestion would be that it should be incorporated into the Constitution. Whatever position you wish to contest for, whatever office you may occupy as an elective office or officer, you can only earn the national minimum living wage, whatever the figure may be. Those who are not prepared to earn the national minimum wage should not dare to contest. In 2003, when I contested to be governor of Oyo State, I did so on a program of a governor on a worker's wage. So these are the kinds of policies that we can adopt in order to discourage people who only want to serve their pockets rather than serving the people. In order to discourage people who want to use public office against public good.
Well, Mr. Aburushade, just once, one other thing, perhaps in that same line, a good number of Nigerians have been wondering how come, even now, because you see, for me, whatever government is doing, we complain only about the president most of the time. When it was Jonathan, everyone was calling Jonathan's name. When it was Buhari, everyone was calling Buhari's name. When it was Obasanjo, when it was Yaradua, everybody calls only the president. No one is, well, we rarely call out the governors, and there are 36 of them. Anytime we have elections, the governors are sworn in. We always have governors. And it would seem like no matter what any president is doing, because it's only after, Chief Obasanjo left government that people were saying, oh, he really did well. He did this and he did this and he did that. And then that this guy is in office now and then there is a problem. We praise our presidents only when they have left office. But the governors, the state governments, they are the ones that are supposed to cascade some of the initiatives of the federal government to their states. A case in point, in 2021, the federal government came up with this initiative of Economic Sustainability Plan. And part of the initiatives there was that in partnership with the states, that the government should do this, the government should do that. President Buhari said, I think it was in 2019 or thereabout, that in partnership with the states, we can take 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in partnership with the states. Do you see that partnership between federal government and the state government happen?
Yes, I think that is a very good idea, which governments, federal, state, local government ought to pursue. In actual fact, there ought to be a consensus that resources should be budgeted for the critical basic needs of ordinary people before they talk about their greed. So that on a national basis, we set aside resources for education, for healthcare, for government-owned companies, and so on, electricity, and so on, roads, education. It is whatever is now left that may be used in paying salaries of those who occupy public office. But today, those who are governing us, they prioritize their greed over the needs of ordinary people. The reverse should be the case. And that reverse should be that there should be a national consensus on the priorities, so that regardless of where anybody may come from, regardless of where any child may come from, access to education as provided under Section 18, sub 3, should be guaranteed. Free and qualitative education, medical care, and so on. So I agree that is the project governments ought to pursue, but they are not pursuing that. Now, they are not interested in that.
Speaking in the same space, I remember this president, when he hosted some people in the presidential villa, was addressing them, and I think it was the traditional rulers, asking them to call out the governors, particularly in concerning the local government administrations. Now, the reason I'm asking this question with our eyes squarely on the Tinubu administration is that it is when we expect one human being to do whatever it is that we expect him to do, even though he swore, by the Constitution and by whatever means to uphold the Constitution, at the end of the day, one human being cannot police effectively almost 1,500 ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as corporations of the federal government. But then we also have 3 tiers of government. We have local government administrations. And the president at the time was saying to his guests, we should call out the governors concerning the local government administrations. Do you see that happening? How do you see the various traditional rulers, the various community development associations holding their state governors account, particularly as it concerns local government administrations, which the federal government has won a case at the Supreme Court about?
Yes, I think I agree with you absolutely. We face that challenge of challenging, holding to account those who are governing at lower levels of government, at the state and local governments. That is a challenge that should be embraced, not only by traditional rulers, because the traditional rulers, may not have the capacity to advise governors or even chairmen of local governments, because many of them, live at their pleasure, at the pleasure of governors and chairmen of local governments. They are paid salaries, and they are ordered about. They are hardly respected. But civil society should take more interest in holding state governments and local governments to account, particularly now in the context of the judgment of the Supreme Court that has tried to salvage the local governments from the control of governors in terms of allocations to the local governments. Even though I'm aware that in a state like Oyo State, the local governments are saying no, they prefer enslavement of the governor. They don't need the freedom. But that also talks to the manner in which they get to office, because many of them, if they are in office on the basis of the support, godfatherism of the governor, it may be difficult to go against the governor. In actual fact, for some of them, they may just receive their allocation and just hand it over to the governor, asking the governor to direct them the best way.
If we're discussing Nigeria's matter, we need more time. We need a lot of time to really fully understand all the nooks and crannies of our issue. But unfortunately, that's where we have to wrap up our conversation with you this morning. Hopefully, we'll have more conversations with you soon. Thank you so much for being with us on the program this morning.
Very much. It'll always be a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Mr. Femi Aboishade, the author and legal practitioner. We'll go on a commercial break right now. And at the top of the hour, we have business right here on Sunrise Day. So please stay with us.